We're breaking down the Buffalo Bills 2025 salary cap outlook today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of the Herd Mentality Substack, co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, co-host of the NFL First Read Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Well, folks, welcome in. It's going to be a busy week for the Buffalo Bills, the NFL, and, of course, this podcast. The NFL Scouting Combine starts today. Sean McDermott, Bills head coach, speaks with the media at 4 o'clock Eastern time on Monday. Tuesday at 2 p.m., we hear from general manager Brandon Beane. You should expect a few days this week with multiple podcasts. Today, we have the salary cap outlook that I'm going to do right now, but we will hear from Coach McDermott later today. We should have the coaching staff finalized for 2025. I don't think Sean McDermott takes the podium at the Combine without that being finalized, so I'm sure we'll get that, and there'll be plenty of opportunities to analyze that. We got to talk corners and safeties as we've done the 2024 performance reviews and kind of set the tone for the offseason at each position group. We got corners and safeties left to do. And then 2 weeks from today, the legal tampering period opens, which means players can start negotiating new contracts with new teams. Player movement's going to be happening like crazy. We got to get ready for that as well. So busy week, busy next week. It's just the NFL. It never sleeps. So there's always plenty to do, and we'll be covering it every step of the way. So make sure that you are dialed in. Again, there's going to be days this week with multiple podcasts. So head on a swivel there. And then, like I said, there's 2 weeks until the start of free agency. And I'm going to be doing a bunch of free agency preview stuff in the Herd Mentality Substack. An article on wide receivers later today. Several on defensive tackles and edge rushers, corners as well, that I think the Bills could be targeting with my analysis on each of them. So tons going on. Don't miss out. Herd Mentality Substack. There's a link in today's show notes if you'd like to check that out. But our focus for today's conversation is the 2025 salary cap outlook. And Dan Graziano, end of last week, shared that NFL teams have been informed that the 2025 salary cap is going to come in between $275.5 and $281.5 million. We'll have the firm number on that soon, but that's the range that we've been told we should expect it to fall into, which is up, again, up from the 2024 salary cap, which was $255.4 million. Over the last 2 years, the NFL salary cap has gone up $53 million, potentially more, depending on where it falls in 2025. So it is going up and up and up, and as such, we have to continue to recalibrate the way we look at player contracts. And I talked a lot about this last week. You cannot obsess over APY. You just can't do it. A contract that was signed 3 years ago with a salary cap that was $50 million less, it's not the same. It's just not the same. So you've got to recalibrate your expectations, and you got to distance yourself from APY. You got to talk about percentage of cap at signing. And we will do that on this podcast as we've talked about potential extensions last week for guys like Greg Rousseau, guys like Christian Benford. It's percentage of cap. That's where it has to fall in for you to have a good understanding there. So the Bills currently in 2025 have between $290 and $295 million in cap liabilities. So they enter this offseason about $10 million over the cap, depending on where things fall, both where the accurate number is for the Bills and where the NFL ultimately lands on their salary cap. Now, the salary cap is as real as it gets. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. If they don't think the salary cap is real, they simply just don't understand it. Now, teams that want to maximize their opportunity to compete know how to maximize and manipulate the salary cap, and the Bills have done that. And today on this podcast, I'm going to present a menu of 13 different logical moves that are available for the Buffalo Bills to clear more than $75 million in 2025 cap space. Now, this is a menu. I'm presenting a menu. Not all of this should be done. Not all of this will be done. I am presenting a menu of options, and several of these things will happen, but just know it's not necessarily all of these things. The intent is to share the different opportunities. Now, there's more than 13 different things that can happen, but these are the most logical, straightforward, the things that you could really see being the path, or at least part of the path for Brandon Beane. And so we'll talk about the ways the Bills can create cap space through contract extensions, releasing some players, and restructuring the contract for some players. And I do want to start with restructures. And when a team restructures a contract, a part of the player's base salary is converted into a signing bonus that is prorated across the remaining years of the contract to create immediate cap relief. Now, there's a downside to this because it does increase the player's future cap hits. So teams got to be selective about which contracts they ultimately restructure, and you should only choose to restructure contracts for players who are definitively in the team's future plans, right? You don't want to commit to more money in future years to players that you don't really plan on keeping around. But if you think they're going to be around, great opportunity to move it around and get your cap savings now, and understanding that in the future, the cap keeps going up. And so it's not a bad idea. Teams do this, and the Bills have done this, and I think they will with some players this year. There's 3 big-time candidates for restructures. Actually, 4 big-time candidates for restructures. We'll start with Dion Dawkins, Bills left tackle. The Bills can restructure, do a base salary conversion. Like I said, put it into a signing bonus, spread it throughout the rest of the deal. That frees up $9.8 million. Dion Dawkins, obviously part of this team's plans. Starting left tackle keeps getting better and better. I don't think you have any hesitation there. That one I expect to happen. $9.8 million with Dion Dawkins. Ed Oliver. The Bills can restructure Ed Oliver, and that would be $8.7 million in cap savings. And, you know, I know Ed Oliver didn't quite have the start to the season that we wanted him to. But in 2023, at the end of 2024, I think he reminded you of the type of player he is. And most importantly, the Bills are committed to Ed Oliver. And, you know, he's not going anywhere. I think you look at the next couple seasons, and Ed Oliver is certainly part of the plan for the Bills. And so, therefore, it makes a lot of sense to go ahead and take advantage of this opportunity to restructure and get the $8.7 million in cap space. The next guy, Taron Johnson, starting nickel corner. You can restructure his deal and get $3.3 million in cap space. And we know that Taron Johnson is a core piece of this roster, core piece of the defense, one of the best nickel corners in the entire NFL. He's an every down player as a slot corner. Part of the plans, you don't have any hesitation about restructuring his deal. Then the last player that I want to mention is Dawson Knox. And Dawson Knox, the Bills can restructure his contract and get $6.2 million in cap savings. And I know that there's a lot of people that think Dawson Knox is overpaid. And if you want to measure that through his receiving output, then yeah, he is. That's true. Dawson Knox is also basically a starting player for this offense that is an excellent blocking player, and he's a big-time leadership guy. So yeah, maybe he's a tick overpaid due to the receiving output. But there's a lot more on the menu for Dawson Knox. And the reality is the Bills are committed to Dawson Knox, right? They love him. I think he loves the Bills. He's going to be around. And so, yeah, maybe he's on the overpaid side of things, but he's going to be around. And so take advantage of the opportunity to restructure his deal and get your cap savings for a player that's going to be around. That's the whole point. And so, yeah, he's overpaid. Sure. That's a different conversation. And the Bills aren't any closer to getting out of the contract. So you might as well take advantage of this opportunity to restructure Dawson Knox. So Ed Oliver for $8.7 million, Dion Dawkins for $9.8, Taron Johnson for $3.3, and Dawson Knox for $6.2 million. Those are very simple restructures that gets the Bills a bunch of cap space if they were to pull all of those levers. All right, there's a lot more the Bills can do. We're going to talk about release candidates on the other side of it with a big conversation on Von Miller. Folks, be sure to stick with me. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you could stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game more exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late-game rally or picking up a player to hit a clutch three, I never feel like I miss my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, let's talk release candidates. And this feels like a good opportunity to remind you that I'm only presenting a menu. I am not suggesting that the Bills release all of these players. I'm presenting a menu. And so there's several players, 6 players that I'm going to talk about right now that the Bills could release and create some cap savings. We will start with Von Miller. And the Bills can release Von Miller and save $8.4 million in 2025 cap space. Now, there's some dead cap accumulation, and they could even post June 1 release him and get a bunch more cap space, but I don't think that's a logical move. I don't think you would do that, and then you'd pile on dead cap space in 2026. I think your options with Von Miller, you either release him for $8.4 million in cap savings, or you renegotiate his contract. And the Bills did that last year, and Von Miller took a bunch of concessions and wound up saving the Bills a bunch of cap space. That could certainly happen this year. Now, if it does happen, the cap savings for the Bills must be at or greater than what they would get if they released him. So that's first and foremost. No matter what happens, Von Miller, you need to save the Bills $8.4 million in cap space if there's a renegotiated deal. And I think that's probably very attractive for Von Miller, right? Von Miller, obviously at this point in his career, wants to play for a contender, and he certainly loves playing in Buffalo. He's made that very, very clear. And so I'm sure he'd love to just stay there as opposed to, all right, now you got to find a new team. Hopefully it's one that you like, that has a chance to win, that has a logical role for him. And so I can understand how this would make sense for Von Miller to be like, well, yeah, I don't really want to hit the market. Let's make it work here, right? Now, the other side of that is the Bills also have to want that. The Bills have to want Von Miller to continue on this team. And I can take it or leave it. I think I was probably, I don't want to say as defensive, but I certainly, I thought Von Miller had a pretty good season. And as a situational pass rusher, about a third of the snaps, even had some good run defense snaps. But I'm at the point now, though, where I'm not expecting him to build upon the season, right? I mean, he's 36 years old. I would be pretty satisfied with just letting those snaps go to somebody else. So I can see how this makes sense for Von Miller, but does it also make sense for the Bills? Do you want to commit that playing time to Von Miller, or is it time to get some new blood in the building, right? I think that's where you want to consider both sides of the equation. So whatever happens with Von Miller, it needs to net the Bills $8.4 million in cap space. I think it will. It's just a matter of renegotiate or release. The next player I'll talk about is David Edwards, Bills starting left guard. The Bills could release him and save $4 million in cap space. They don't need to release him. He's a good starting left guard. But if they thought they had a starter between Alec Anderson or Tylen Grable or Cedric Van Pran Granger, and you wanted to take an opportunity to put a young guy in that spot and move on from David Edwards, you can do that and free up $4 million. You can also extend David Edwards and free up a little over $2 million. So there's huge ends of that spectrum as well. I think the Bills like David Edwards, and I think he's very much a process guy, knows what every player on the field's doing on every snap. I think there's a lot of benefit for there being a stable person next to Dion Dawkins. He's even commented on that, how he really hasn't year over year had the same left guard next to him. I think there's a lot of benefits there. And David Edwards was drafted to the Rams when Aaron Kromer was the offensive line coach, had multiple years there, has had multiple years in Buffalo with them together. You could kind of see this staying the course. But as I do present a menu, it's hard to just simply gloss over, well, yeah, they could free up $4 million and not talk about it, right? I think it's a worthwhile conversation. So I'm not necessarily predicting that the Bills will release David Edwards, but as far as putting this menu together, I thought it needed to be included. Mitchell Trubisky, the Bills can release him and free up $2.5 million. And when they extended Mike White or signed him off the practice squad and also included signing him through the 2025 season, you kind of saw the writing on the wall here. Now, with Mitchell Trubisky, I think what's challenging with this is I don't know that you want to release him right away. Maybe you do. But you probably would like to have a legitimate competition, right? I would. I'd like to see Trubisky and Mike White compete throughout camp in preseason to be the backup quarterback. And then, when you make that decision, you have to feel comfortable with the direction that you pick, but also layering into that conversation that there's $2.5 million that can be freed up from releasing Mitchell Trubisky, which could then give you, of course, operating funds during the season if you needed to go that path. So, again, I don't know that it's a now move, but you certainly can see that happening down the line and see the cap benefit of doing so, especially with Mike White signed through the 2025 season. So Mitchell Trubisky can be released for $2.5 million. Sam Martin can be released for $1.9 million in cap savings, the Bills punter. And what's interesting there is the Bills signed Jake Camarda to a futures contract. Jake Camarda was a 4th-round pick by the Bucs in, I think it was 2022. And 4th-round pick out of Georgia. That's a pretty high pick for a punter. And he was their punter for 2 years, kind of declined that second year. And then I think shortly into his 3rd season, they wind up releasing him. And then he never really gets another opportunity, signs a futures deal in Buffalo. So, there's certainly some concerns there. But a talented punter, nonetheless, a guy that gets drafted in the 4th round, right? That doesn't just happen, right? You have to have some level of skill. And nobody was surprised when he was coming out that year with Jordan Stout. Like, there was a big time conversation about, these guys being big time punters. So he's in the fray. The Bills can move on from Sam Martin for $1.9 million in savings. I don't know for sure that it'll happen, but again, on this menu, got to talk about it. Then there's 2 other players, A.J. Epinesa and Daquan Jones. The Bills can release Daquan Jones for $1.8 million in cap savings and A.J. Epinesa for $3.3 million in cap savings. Not convinced either will happen. Obviously, A.J. Epinesa, I think, is a good rotational player for the Bills, and I'm expecting the Bills to make some type of move that's going to bring in a player that's better than A.J. Epinesa that will play over A.J. Epinesa. And so for A.J. Epinesa will no longer be your defensive end 2, he'll be your defensive end 3, and I think that puts him in a better position. You could certainly just play out this contract and feel fine with him as your 3rd or 4th defensive end. But again, as part of the menu, you do get $3.3 million in cap savings if you moved on. Daquan Jones, $1.8 million in savings. I think at a minimum, Daquan Jones can be an answer as part of your nose tackle equation. Would I like to upgrade Daquan Jones and have a succession plan in place? Of course I would. And I think the Bills should prioritize figuring that out this offseason. And that's not that much of a cap savings, $1.8 million to move on. Plus, there'd be some dead cap accumulation. You probably just stick with Daquan Jones, but he's a logical player that you could point to as, all right, if they did want to free up a little cap space and move on from Daquan Jones, they could. So the menu of releases, Von Miller, $8.4 million, David Edwards, $4 million, Mitchell Trubisky, $2.5 million, Sam Martin, $1.9 million, A.J. Epinesa, $3.3 million, and Daquan Jones, $1.8 million. All right, there are more players to talk about, more levers that Brandon Beane can pull, and this time it's in the form of contract extensions. Some big names, some big money contracts potentially here We'll talk about those on the other side. Folks, be sure to stick with me. All right, we are going to talk players that the Bills can extend their contract and get cap savings. And you probably think to yourself, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. You're going to give them more money and you're going to create cap space. Yes, you are. That's exactly what you're going to do. Because with a contract extension, you have more years on the deal to work with. And so the money that's owed this year, you can charge against future years and create cap space now. And at the same time, locking in players that you like, right, and want to continue to work with as part of your winning formula. And so 3 players make a lot of sense for contract extensions. You've heard of this first one. It's Josh Allen. The Bills can extend that guy and create some cap space. You can see I got the JA17 MVP shirt on here on the YouTube channel. If you like to get one, there's a link in today's show notes. The Herd Mentality Shop. Some great color options available, but you can check out the MVP shirts. So the Bills can extend Josh Allen. Now, put this in your back pocket. They don't have to extend him. They can also restructure him. So the conversation that we had at the beginning segment of this episode about Dion Dawkins and Ed Oliver and Dawson Knox and Taron Johnson, Josh Allen fits into that bucket. And the Bills could restructure him and save $11 million in cap space. They can also extend him and free up $11.8 million in cap space. And it doesn't matter what the extension is. We're talking about reducing the current cap hit and spreading it into future years. So we don't have to sit here and talk about exactly what the deal is. That doesn't actually matter in the 2025 cap savings that we're interested in figuring out today. So I do think that with Dak Prescott signing a contract last offseason that paid him $60 million a year, well, guess what? Josh Allen's going to get paid a whole lot more than that. $65, $70 million a season. All possible. Nothing would surprise me, and I'm not sure there's a dollar amount that wouldn't be worth it, right? I think we learned last year that Josh Allen sets the floor for this team. I mean, obviously, right? The Bills had a transition year, a soft reset on the roster, had one other Pro Bowler, right? And he had an MVP year. The Bills were, one drive away from the Super Bowl. He sets the floor for the team. And, the money doesn't matter. Right? It just doesn't with Josh Allen. So bottom line, he's your quarterback. That's not going to change. Get the deal done, right? Because ultimately, with the way that the cap continues to go up, and I keep saying this, deals are never going to be less expensive than they are right now. Do it, right? Just do it. And again, the incentive with doing it for Josh Allen is you're locking in, obviously, the player that's not going anywhere, and you free up cap space this year. And then a big part of the Bills' formula to cap compliancy over the years has been restructuring Josh Allen's contract. So you build in those opportunities down the line to give you the flexibility that you need every offseason to become cap compliant. So, yeah, extend Josh Allen. Greg Rousseau. Greg Rousseau is playing on a hard $13.4 million cap hit on the 5th-year option of his deal. You can extend him and free up $9.7 million in 2025 cap space. I am absolutely for this. Greg Rousseau is the Bills' best defensive lineman. He's Brandon Beane's best first-round pick. That wasn't Josh Allen. A-plus run defender. I think he's probably a B-plus level pass rusher. And I think if the Bills are able to improve the players around Greg Rousseau, it's going to unlock even more for his game. And he's young. He's ascending. I think he turns 25 next month or something like that. He's super young. Experienced. Yeah, I want more Greg Rousseau for sure. And again, the benefit of doing that is you free up $9.7 million in cap space while staying committed to your best young defensive lineman. The other player for an extension that makes a lot of sense is Connor McGovern. And the Bills can extend him and free up $4.2 million in cap space. And Connor McGovern made the Bills right about the big transition last year. Cutting Mitch Morse, trade away Ryan Bates. We want to get Connor McGovern to center. We think that's his most natural position. And then that opens up the opportunity to move David Edwards to left guard. The Bills nailed it. They absolutely nailed it. And I understand anybody that had some concerns about that at the time, because we came out of 2023 thinking, man, that Bills offensive line was really good. Let's keep it back. Let's keep it together. Let's run it back. And then the Bills didn't. And then it got better. So a big part of that equation was Connor McGovern, who's still young, sees the game the same way as Josh Allen. You can tell there's a good personality fit. He holds the pizza parties every Friday night at his house. Like, just a great guy for the locker room, great player. He's your center, right? This is your center. So go ahead and lock him up. I'd expect that to come in around $10 million a season, maybe a little bit more, and sign him to like a 3-year, $30 million deal. I think that would make a lot of sense. And in doing so, you free up a little over $4 million in cap space. So Josh Allen, you could extend him for $11.8 million. Greg Rousseau, 9.7, and Connor McGovern, 4.2. Now, there's other moves the Bills could make. Like, they could extend Terrell Bernard. They could extend James Cook. And there could be cap saving opportunities with that as well, since those guys have the proven performance escalator that kind of pushes up their 2025 salary. You can do the same thing where you reduce that a little bit, spread it into future years. So there are more levers that the Bills can pull. There are more. They could trade Kyer Elam and save a few bucks. There's different things that are on the menu. But these were the most straightforward, logical moves that I thought I needed to discuss with you here today. And if the Bills did all 13 of those things that I discussed, that's $75.8 million in cap cleared. And that would give the Bills around $65 million in spending. And even if it's half that, again, it's not going to be all that. If they do half of those things, the Bills are going to be sitting with $30, $35 million in cap space. That's just a lot better of a position that the Bills have been in recent off seasons, which is great. Like, that's the whole point of doing the transition that you did. You got younger and cheaper. You're just in a lot better position. And that's exciting, because if the Bills want to go after a few free agents, they can. If they want to trade for a big-time pass rusher, they can do it. There's nothing prohibitive about the cap. They have the levers to pull to get the space needed to add to this roster in a meaningful way. And so, the last year, the big move was Curtis Samuel, right? Or year before that, the big move was Connor McGovern. I think the big move is going to be a little bigger than either of those two players. And, maybe the real benefit is you get to add, several players to this team. And so I'm excited to find out what they do. But hopefully you can see through this podcast, the Bills are in a good spot. The Bills are in a good spot and have plenty of levers that they can pull and have the opportunity to be pretty much as aggressive as they want. Now, they're not going to go do everything, right? That's not realistic, but they can do a lot. They can do a lot and increase this talent level and, position themselves to kick down that door they keep talking about. So we'll hear more from the Bills brass in the next coming days. Sean McDermott later on Monday, Beane on Tuesday. Free agency will be here. Literally, the legal tampering period opens 2 weeks from today. So things are going to be happening, and I'll be here for you every step of the way to break it all down. Don't miss anything. Make sure that you're subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Might be back again for you later today. Like I said, we got a lot of content coming this week, probably multiple days with multiple episodes. So stay dialed in. Go Bills, and I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.